when you're aligned with what you're supposed to be doing and, you tap into strengths and you align it with passion, it brings out the best in you. When there was challenge, I was always driven to find a solution. To this day, the more complexity there is, the more I'm drawn into it. So there was a desire now to take the knowledge and mobilize it. My specialization drew upon my senior leader expertise. I use the North Star analogy a lot. And when you know it's off, you got to bring it back to north. It's not sustainable to stay off.
Hello and welcome to the Differentiation podcast. My name is Michèle Sorgaroli and I'm your host. And today we are being joined by a very special guest, Vania Sakelaris. Vania is a seasoned leader, advisor, and executive coach, and the founder of VAS Associates, a management consulting firm that embodies and empowers leaders and helps them grow with challenge, change, and transformation. Having had a 30-year career as a senior executive and CEO, Vania brings strategic focus, wisdom, authenticity, and an unwavering passion for capacity building, which I have seen over and over again. She's also been honored with the University of Toronto's Arbor Award for her extraordinary contributions to higher education, which kind of is more proof that she is truly a trusted and committed partner in developing leaders to unleash their true potential. Vania, I am so delighted that you're here joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, Michèle. You're somebody who I admire in this space and all the work that you do with and for the leaders that you support. So thank you for thinking.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, this is a treat. Well, you and I met doing our Ivy coaching certification. I don't even remember when that was. That was a few years ago now.
Yes. Pre-COVID. There was a life pre-COVID and a post-COVID life.
That's right. Exactly. So we met at, not surprisingly, at the Ivy Education, at Ivy Academy and higher education. You're involved there. What I want to really talk about is I've known your story a little bit. So you spent a lot of time in corporate. Mm-hmm. And then you took a flying leap and decided to leave after 30 some odd years. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what happened that gave you the courage and the inspiration to found VAS and Associates.
Well, I tell students today that not to think, start with the end in mind in terms of a direction, because you'll never know what the path will bring. And that's something in my mentoring I preach, because I'm actually, proof to that outcome. And then I get to witness many of those in the work that I do with the many inspirational leaders that I support. So I'd say that it was a passion for helping that drew me to that drew me to healthcare. And I picked, while I was in university, some electives in working senior care, and I found that I came alive. It was something in my bio and psychology studies. I was really interested in what makes the mind and what makes the body work. And so I pursued healthcare and with a target audience of seniors, and I continued pulling on that thread, not knowing where it was going to take me. And there was some postgraduate studies in gerontology, and then I learned about long-term care administration. And I found myself, that path led me to a role in senior care, but running an organization as the leader at the age of 27. And so I hadn't signed up to be a leader. I wasn't interested in leadership at the time. It was just to help seniors. And I was quite interested in advocating for, helping to give these people who had given so society something back at this chapter in their life. And so all that to say, it took me to healthcare, it took me to seniors, and I ran nursing homes for the first 10 years of my career in the not-for-profit space. I was part of a startup of a not-for-profit, working with architects and boards, not even knowing what boards were, not understanding governance, never having been trained in any of that. And then I often say that when you're aligned with what you're supposed to be doing and, you tap into strengths and you align it with passion, it brings out the best in you. So doing things that I liked and that I was increasingly better at got me noticed by senior leaders and who kept tapping beyond that point on my door. And so I ended up being seconded to the Ministry of Health, and it was supposed to be a one-year gig. My then employer said, "We can't afford to let you go, but we've got to let you go." And it ended up being 2 years, and eventually I never went back. So I went from 10 years of somebody wearing the shoe, being a leader on the ground, baptism by fire, to the person designing shoes. And I had a good sense of how the shoe fit. So understanding the pain points of leaders and teams and budgets and deficits and boards. And so I brought that to my world as a funder and as a policymaker and as a program planner. And I found that every year I stayed for 10 more years, and every year I got promoted into new roles, bigger scope of responsibility, to the point that I was overseeing the PMO of one of the largest regional health authorities in Canada. And so, as somebody who was a science student with a passion for seniors, found herself, with an oversight of $250 million portfolios within a $5 billion health system, that was nowhere close to what drew me to wanting to help. But the help always just kept showing up. So it was during that second year, the second decade, and I was supervising more and more, large teams. I realized I had only done my bachelor's when I had started, because I hadn't planned to kind of land where I landed. And so what became increasingly evident was the need to go back. And what I found in working with leaders with big scales and scopes of responsibilities, my clients, for example, were some of the largest CEOs of the largest hospitals in Canada. And at that point, in my 30s or late 30s, preparing myself for multi-million-dollar negotiations. And I remember one day walking down the hall of Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto, prepared to discuss a multi-million-dollar deal. And I started to feel stretched, and in terms of business acumen, and observing many of the board meetings with some of these inspirational leaders, I became more self-aware of what I didn't know, what I needed to know. And that's something I now mentor people on. So I knew that I had to do something about it to continue to be effective. And I started to scope options in terms of graduate studies. And I landed on Ivy's executive MBA program as the gap filler and as the opportunity for me to take it to the next level. And so that was around almost year 25 of my career. And it was after my first 2 decades, but I knew that I had to do something about it. But it was in the classroom and understanding the international language of business. It brought alive the fact of a few things. One, that I wasn't limited to healthcare. My desire to help people increased exponentially. And understanding the playbook of business gave me permission to play in other industries. Because my studies included global studies, I felt instantly that I was having an impact in Toronto and Ontario, but I had an interest in. So I bit the global bug and saying, how many more people can we help? And I'll say that when it started to hit me in terms of the fact that I had entered healthcare to help people, but having taken increasingly senior roles, I got further away from people. So I was writing briefing notes and reports on the many thousands or thousands or hundreds of thousands of people we were helping in Ontario, but I was too far away from people. And my desire to help people, that gap emerged for me while I was doing my studies. So I started to toy with the thought of maybe setting something up. And I would playfully tell people who I was working with at the time in healthcare, when I set up a business, I'll come back and talk to you. And there was one person I remember who reached out to me and said, do you do consulting? I said, not yet, but when I do, I'll come back. And she was my first client, fast forward years later.
Aww.
So the entrepreneurship bug hit me then. And I think it was really, I credit my studies, my self-awareness, A, in terms of gaps, and B, in terms of passion, that made me the course correcting. And a big part of that was my first introduction to a coach. And I recall being in meetings, in board meetings with leaders and some of, like I said, very inspirational senior leaders in healthcare. And I would hear them at the end of our change meeting say, I'm going to take this back to my coach. And I'd say, why would he need a coach? He's the but I didn't know what I didn't know in terms of, but I had heard reference to coaching. And so it was in my own experience as a coach that I often coined the term, I drank the Kool-Aid. Because I had a thought leader partner, somebody who was playing back my voice, helping to challenge things that were narratives or norms or perspectives. And so at the end of my engagement of almost a year, I asked him where he had studied so that I could do for other people what he'd done for me. So it was at that point that I got certified, though I had been coaching teams for years in healthcare. So that was kind of the catalyst for the pivot. And that's what kind of landed me to the beginning of the next chapter.
That's gorgeous. And it was always about the people, helping the people. Thank you. That's a beautiful story. There were a few things that really stood out to me. The first one was, You started, you alluded to very quickly, you said my studies in bio and psych, and then you said mind and body, or
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
or mind, yeah, mind and body. So that kind of stood out for me. I thought, oh, so there's always been a part of where building capacity, the mind and the body has always been an area of interest for you, which I find really interesting throughout the
Yeah,
whole course of your career. And interesting that led into healthcare because a lot of mind body stuff that happens in healthcare, which is curious to me. Yeah. The one thing that really, really stands out in your story to me, Vanya, is you use the word getting, or the expression getting tapped. I got tapped. And what I noticed was you were following your passion or following the breadcrumbs, right? You were just saying yes and allowing for the the universe or the energy or the opportunities to guide you because you were passionate about what you were doing. That's what I'm hearing. Is that an accurate?
100%. There was a little bit of blind faith, and I started to tell myself, if they believe in me, I've got to believe in me. If they're seeing something, then I've got to roll with it. And
That's,
so
yeah. And that's such a rare thing. Like that wisdom in and of itself, it's usually, people are like, why me? And they're doubting as opposed to trusting someone else's trust or what they see, what someone else sees in them. They
I
don't trust that, right? How
so
did you develop that wisdom at such a young age? Because that's rare.
I'd say that I've had leaders over the years say, where do do you have any self-talk? How do you guide your decisions? Where do your decisions come from? And is it a gut? Is it here? And I said, you know what? It's almost like there was always a self-awareness of a debate, the judge and jury in my head. So there was always a, what if we do? What if we don't? Maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should. And so there was always a counter at play. And the more aware I became of the court of public opinion here, I felt I became a better decision maker because it wasn't all skewed based on I can't, I won't, I shouldn't, I couldn't, versus I think I can, I think I might, and also the curiosity that often enabled the yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've talked about self-awareness a couple of times. Um, One of the things that I think is really unique to you and that I've been hearing. You mentioned that you got to the point where I jotted down that you outgrew where you landed,
Mhm.
which I think is really, really interesting because that was at the point where you thought, oh, wow, I don't know what I need to know. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I need to know, but I'm already in a position where I need to know those things. So it's almost like your learning needed to catch up with your progression,
Mhm.
which is fascinating to me because most people are learning to advance their progression, not
Right.
to catch up with their progression. And so your journey has this story, this thread throughout where you're allowing following the breadcrumbs and saying yes to opportunities. And I know this about you, so it's easy for me to say, see this, saying, yeah, let's go do this. And then you're like, okay, I gotta stock up or shore up on who I need to be to thrive in this setting.
Michèle, great observation always. You're an amazing coach. You're just an incredible human being, but an amazing coach. So it's so intuitive. I'd say that, it really in hindsight,
Mm,
when I look at the case study of me, myself and what contributed to the different chapters of the career. I think mindset is so key. And that's something that when I mentor students starting their career, even leaders that I'm working with, on any given day, mindset can make or break us. And so they think I can. There used to be a book
mhm.
about the little engine. I
That's
think I
right. I think I
can.
can. I think I can.
And I can't do it. And I said, yes, yes, if you think you can, you will. If you think you can't, you won't. And so there was this can do, and I was,
Mm,
I was always the half full. There was a
mm,
challenge, but behind the challenge there was an opportunity. And if
mm,
it's never ventured, never gained. And so I was curious again about what makes the mind tick, what makes the body tick. And when there was challenge, I was always driven to find a solution. To this day, the more complex complexity there is, the more I'm drawn into it. And so it was through practical, giving myself permission to play in complexity, giving going into things with a positive can-do mindset and with an opportunity lens versus a negative and
mhm.
lens allowed me to kind of navigate, lead by example, and then discover strengths
Yeah.
and development areas along the way.
Yeah. Where talking about where did this part of you develop? Like, was this something that was part of a family dynamic? Was this something you learned as a young leader or through school? This idea of playing in complexity, which I understand is very intellectually stimulating. So that makes sense to me,
Mhm.
playing in complexity, because it's like, ooh, let's go have some fun. So
Mhm.
even the language of play is really insightful in terms of how you think about complexity. You don't see it in the same way that many might. So just the language itself is interesting.
Mhm.
Never ventured, never gained, half full in through the lens of opportunity, can do. Where did all this come from?
When I think back, I'm the eldest of a family who immigrated to Canada in the 60s. And so my parents eventually became entrepreneurs. And so I observed them go from thought to implementation. But their road travel was tough. And I think they demonstrated every given day for me, can do, must do. They came to a country with no family. They came to a country with no language. They came with very limited financial ability. And so observing that as our operating system
Yeah,
and so the think I can was evident around me. And
right.
they leaned on me a lot as the person who, I learned English. My first language was Greek because my parents emigrated from Greece. And when I went to school, I didn't even know English well yet.
Aw,
But the option of not integrating and not learning started right from the day one in studies, and the option of not helping them through translation as they navigated norms in a new country. And so I became almost an advisor, and the option of not helping my family, not helping to let myself to overcome just
interesting.
natural operating system challenges. It just became a norm. Life wasn't easy initially,
Mm.
but choices helped us navigate things and make them easier. So that mindset, I think, right from childhood, I'd say nature nurture, part of that kind of showed up for me.
Helping. You were helping from probably as when you learned English, you were then helping, right? Um, how did that, how was that experience for you as a young primary school student, a child, to your parents and helping them who are parents, seeing yourself as a valuable resource to your parents? I would imagine that would have a significant impact on you.
It's funny, you just reminded me as you're saying that, I won more than once citizenship awards in my primary school. And it was for helping, helping the teacher, helping the classroom. And so the helping showed up. And again, because it was part of the role, it was a norm and it was just a thing to do, but it gave me pleasure. It wasn't help. And so, win-win,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
the pleasure in helping, that what came back from helping wasn't a chore. So I think that activated that, let me help you, theme that becomes part of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine that your parents were, at the feedback loop as a youngster, as you were helping them. I imagine it was a very positive experience in that to your point, the feedback that they were giving you as
Absolutely.
you were helping them was nurturing that helping mindset, if you will, further, because the feedback would have been positive, I would imagine, as opposed to taken for granted or not necessarily valued, that something like that.
I think it's a combination of, yes, probably expressions of gratitude as a family. I also have a younger sister, so we all were in a helping mode together.
Mm,
But I believe it was also just observing. My parents were helpers. They helped the community. They helped each other. They helped their family. They helped others who came. They helped others who were navigating similar paths. And then they chose, careers and entrepreneurship paths where, again, they were helping. So it was just, service became a norm in term of a value for
hmm
us.
exactly. So that's obviously a common thread that was nurtured at a very young age. And then here we find, like what I've heard in your story is you were in HR and in healthcare, and there's been in your entrepreneurial venture, there's been a very strong orientation towards higher education as well, as we alluded to earlier. What drew you to education as a different field or industry, if you will?
Great question. I'll go back to my university days. I was volunteering, and I believed in the importance of corporate social responsibility and paying it forward and civic duty. And so, one thing I did was pick something that I liked, and there was two things I liked in my late teens: teaching and seniors. And so I was volunteering at an Alzheimer Day Center in a nursing home at the same time that I was also kind of a not supply teacher, but we used to go back and read to grade one students in the same primary school that I went to. And so I was helping in the classroom and reading and working with children. And so that desire to teach showed up early. And
Mm-hmm.
I parked it though when the seniors took flight.
Yeah.
And where teaching reemerged, I had limited budgets as a not-for-profit leader, and I had oversight of teams of 150, and then teams of 250. But I couldn't send everybody to school, so I did a lot of in-service training myself. I invited people in, but the training, coaching, and mentoring happened for 20 years in organizations I led. I led for-profit, not-for-profit organizations. So teaching showed up prior to my career, during my career, to the point that even during one of my stints as administrator, I started teaching at community college and teaching nurses who wanted to become administrators, and I was helping them understand policy and proposal writing. And so I taught part-time along the way. And so it showed up when it could. And that was at the time I was working full-time and had children. But as I went back to school, it probably is what ignited me most, the value of education, paying it forward, helping my classroom, my peers helping me. And so I felt that there was a lot I learned by virtue of the path traveled that I hadn't signed up for, but there was a lot of things that I realized I wish I had known earlier. So I wanted to say, for my lessons learned, what can I now pay it forward and tell 21-year-old self, or tell 21-year-olds today, knowing what I now know, and would have been helpful for me, in my navigation. So there was a desire now to take the knowledge and mobilize it. And so there was a different driver tied to teaching that kind of fueled the teaching bug.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing that. And it's interesting because you went from seniors to young people, right? So there's the mentorship piece, which has come up a couple of times now, which is really lovely to see and hear. What I want to just pivot a moment, because as I'm thinking about this conversation, we're in the coaching industry, if you will, coaching, management, consulting. And when we're looking to create a career in an industry where there's so many of us, right? And there's lots of industries like that. When you think about how you, in your own business, and maybe even with your clients, what do you notice for differentiation, or how do you handle differentiation for you and or for your clients? Where do you see differentiation pop up?
When I opted to start my business focusing on leaders, because I'm going back to helping, redefining helping. And as you said, we can be all things to all people and not do very well. So we can't. So in starting a business is, what do I know? What do I like? What am I good at? When anybody who starts on that path is a good starting point. And I knew that because I called myself playfully in that 25-year stint, the Lonely at the Top Club, because I realized how hard it was to be a leader at that time. It was myself and my board and myself and my team. And there was discussions that couldn't be had. And at that time I hadn't had mentors. And so it was tough being at the top. And so my desire was to help people at the top, either at the top of their game or moving towards the top of their game. And having been there, having worn the shoe, and having worked with, at that point, with thousands of, in government, in private, in not-for-profit. And so I started to see themes in terms of the leaders and the challenges we had, and the helper came out. So I want to help the Lonely at the Top Club. And so I opted to grow on to do a few things, draw from my experience as an academic is what I call myself, and draw on research and theory from my graduate studies. And so what does research say? What does my experience tell me? And there's lots there in terms of specializing, something for somebody who has, a big scale of responsibility, complexity in their role, leading teams, dealing with governance. And so my niche got defined. But, and so I started with, saying I want to help people who are on their path. And I want to help them through advising if they need me, because I specialize in strategy. So, help them to, design strategic plans or advance them. If they want teaching, I can teach them and their teams, or if they need one-to-one, it's coaching showed up that way.
Hmm.
And so leadership development became the business, but my specialization drew upon my senior leader expertise.
Yeah.
And so, just the last thing on that point, Michèle, would be that, my differentiation honed was I started to see what my clients valued most. And the more consistent feedback I received there, the more I just flourished in my company. And if I had to say that, having the frank and difficult discussions and telling people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, became
Hmm.
my value proposition. And a lot of what my clients value
Mm.
is the tough love, is the accountability in the partnership, is treating my coaching, discussions like a business meeting. And so they come prepared. They want to be challenged. Many of my clients say, just push me, man, push me. And so that's something that I get valued for. But I was somebody who was pushed, had to push a lot. And so it was a comfortable area in terms
Right.
of differentiation. It was a world I knew well and could draw upon, given at that point 25 years of lived experience.
Really interesting. Like really interesting. There's a couple of things that are highlighted here for me is when I'm thinking about differentiation, there's a couple of things you talked about. So experience and research. So understanding what your experience, how your experience was valuable, and also what did the research tell you? And then the feedback piece as
Mhm.
well was also a way to experience research, but it was different
Yeah,
because it's not as much data necessarily as it is what am I hearing? What's the market telling me?
exactly.
So this is a really interesting piece because when I think about very often when people think about differentiation, and how do they stand out,
Mhm.
right? Most people think, how do I stand out publicly?
Mhm.
Out in the world, how do I show my face or how do I become the next Brene Brown or what have you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And not everybody wants that.
Right.
And what is really poignant in this conversation that you're highlighting here is you've done an exceptional job of differentiating inside the industry and showing up by really being an experiential person, right? So there's differentiation on the outside, and then there's differentiation on the experiential side in the work with your clients, with the community of that industry that you're serving, or what have you. And a lot of people don't see it that way. They don't understand that there are different ways to show up.
Right.
So you're really highlighting that because I'm not hearing marketing and putting yourself out there, and it's not your thing. And yet you're very highly differentiated
Mhm.
inside the
Mhm.
zone of your industry, right?
Mhm.
Which is very, very interesting. And a lot of people don't think of it that way. What resonates for you here? I'm curious.
Well, first, your immense knowledge in this area. I love that using this case as an opportunity to
Oh.
expand, and your knowledge came out here to help
Mm,
broaden the perspective for our listeners about the different ways this can show up. So,
mm.
I love being a partner in that learning because it gives food for thought, and it's something that's meant to catalyze new thoughts, new perspectives. So I was just admiring
Oh.
I was admiring the what came out of your
Thank
observation.
you. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting, I think, on this side, because as we build our career, very often we're not considering
Mhm.
how do we show up in at our best and not feel obligated or that it's necessary to do things a certain way. And what you've done with your career, Vanya, which I really honor and respect, is as you've developed it, you've always held true to what was important to you, is what we've heard throughout. Helping was the primary theme, and it has been the primary theme through your entire story.
Mhm.
And then showing up as a, yes, I'm there for you. If you're calling me up, I will accept and trust you
Right.
and your belief in me, and
Right.
I will rise to that, which is another really interesting piece of wisdom that you would absolutely bring to your engagements, which is unusual, right? In terms of people, as we talked about before, thinking they need to be prepared first before they accept. Sheryl Sandberg wrote about that in Lean In,
Mhm.
right, in her book. And you're really embodying that and showing that you're the living example of that as you've shown us throughout. And then the other piece is you talked about the importance of um, the language of play, right? If you're not having fun doing what you're doing, it's just not joyful. So this is a really big piece in terms of who you are and how you're showing up for your clients. And as I'm thinking now about today going forward, as we launch into the future,
Mm.
tell us a little bit about your vision for what VAS and Associates and your own contribution or impact. What do you see for yourself?
Again, I think a bit of a blind faith. And so my thoughts during my MBA of going helping people internationally came to fruition. And so helping has no borders. And so I've had the pleasure of helping both internet students internationally on different continents as well as leaders internationally. And so we speak like I said, the international language of business. And so where there's challenge and change, there's opportunities for me to help. And so I look forward to opportunities to continue to do that through the network that I've grown. And I'm blessed to have had a network in healthcare, a network in government, a network of coaches, a network of consultants. So the social capital and the people I have had the pleasure of meeting provide opportunity, because a lot of the work that I do has come through my expanded network. And
Mm,
most of my work has been referral. A lot of my work is repeat. I do work with associates, but I think that expanding on the things I like to do and I'm blessed to work with people I choose to work with. And so there's never a shortage of work, but if you're doing what you like and you like the people you're working with, it's not work. It's a privilege and a
yeah.
pleasure. And to your point, I get to model in my work as somebody who's helps to influence and inspire others on their path. Helping people to find that North Star. I use the North Star analogy a lot. And when you know it's off, you got to pay
Hmm.
the compass coordinates and bring it back to north. It's not sustainable to stay off. And so in my case, every
Hmm.
time I went off path, I had to explore what is it, and it's going to bring me back to north. And when I'm working with clients, I look for that in terms whether and work with values and work with strengths and work with needs to kind of fuel that motivation, the science of motivation to bring them on their path. But looking back, I could see where that was something that consciously, in
Hmm.
my recalibration, there's different chapters, and that's something I really believe in. This journey called life and the professional journey we have has different chapters, and not all things are meant to come with them. And every time we move to a new chapter, it's new situations, new needs, new skills. And so the recalibration calls on that. And I can see in hindsight how often I've had to do that, but the necessity in doing it and helping people get unstuck,
Hmm.
at those recalibration points. That's where I see it and help people to navigate it. And so that's just, like I said, a joy and
Right.
a pleasure to do that every day.
Well, you're really touching on a key point for just pure joy in your life, let alone and differentiation as well. But ultimately, differentiation is about, to your point, calibrating to your north, if you will, and fully expressing and fully embodying that in the way that is true for you. And you said it beautifully. It's not sustainable to stay off course. And we see this all the time in individuals, humans, and also in corporate and businesses, right? It's not sustainable to stay off course. So thank you for your wisdom today, Vanya. It's always such a delight to connect with you, and I'm so appreciative and grateful for our conversation. When people here are listening, for those who might like to connect with you and experience a little bit more Vanya, where might they find you?
Either LinkedIn under my name or my website, www.vas-associates.com. And because I choose inspiration as something that I do, I also post quotes daily on Instagram just to kind of inspire those
Mhm.
many, many people I have the honor and privilege of supporting. People starting their journey, people on their journey, people at the top of their game. So many different ways to connect.
Gorgeous. And it's true, those quotes on LinkedIn or on Instagram rather are beautiful. What's your handle so that people can follow you there?
It's at
Sorry.
Associates, no
VAS
hyphen.
Associates. Perfect. Okay. We will find you there for those who are looking for daily inspiration because Vanya can bring a lot of that to you. Vanya, thank you for today. It has been an absolute pleasure and a delight. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for the opportunity, for the wisdom you share with me all the time and with your listeners. Thank you for creating this for people, for their benefit.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping, Michèle.
and onwards. Thanks so much. Take care. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.